Welcome to Coleman Report Live. I'm Bob Coleman. We're talking Main Street and the small business lenders who help it grow. Chuck Evans, Windsor Advantage. Chuck, it's been a while. Happy birthday to you, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you. As I said, I'm eligible for Medicare now, so look out.
And as I said, don't use it. don't put yourself in a situation where you have to use it. Katie, out of undisclosed location, Seattle. Katie, welcome, as always.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, Chuck, what do you do?
Windsor Advantage is probably one of a half dozen national lender service providers. We process, close, and service and provide loan review, but we are the largest with about $2 billion worth of servicing assets under management and 3 offices, so it's good.
Friday before Halloween, Friday before the election, not much has changed, but we thank you all for your time. Let's go through with what we do know. Number one, do you plan on losing LSP for PPP loan servicing? I assume that's one of your services. Chuck, how's that work?
We processed about 16,000 applications, so we're going through the forgiveness stage and then finally the servicing stage. Yes. There we go.
Are you happy with what SBA is doing these days, Chuck?
No, not at all. I mean, it's they were put in a corner because of PPP. You know, the banks were used as a utility. Treasury dictated a lot. So like you said before, we were flying an airplane, putting the wheels on. And now that we're settling down, it just seems like all of the negativity is coming out with, idle fraud. But again, when we slapped this on and they wanted to get the money out the door, I don't know why you can't expect it or why you're surprised.
Yeah, I'm not as harsh as you are for SBA. The reality is they did get the first round out.
Absolutely.
PPP 2.0 is not going to happen before the election, which is unfortunate for a lot of Main Street. But
it really is. And politics shouldn't be involved, but it is. So.
Well, and as we've talked many times, the proposals that we have out there, Katie, are bipartisan, but they got a lot of other issues on their plate that they are resolving first. Have you received forgiveness for PPP loans of $100,000? Chuck, we've been doing these surveys. And Katie, what was the last time that we had, last number we had on this poll? Do you remember right offhand?
We asked last Tuesday and got 11%.
Yeah.
And I don't know if our numbers are, I think we have about the same numbers as we had Tuesday as far as attendees. So I think we'll probably have a pretty decent idea.
14%, yeah. So that's, people are doing well on that. We also are having issues with timing. Yeah. And we'll ask that question next week in terms of what's happening. But this is an interesting question. Someone sent me a notice and said, hey, we had a conversation that a lot of borrowers are simply holding their PPP loan funds in their account, afraid that they're not going to get forgiveness. And what that's doing is that's increasing some banks' core deposits. What do you think it's done nationwide? Chuck, I'll let you take your first crack at this one. What do you think?
I say core deposits are going up. We've talked to banks on their loan to deposit ratios, and those are going down. So I think it is.
Yeah, it's 14.9%. So if those who answered 15% are correct, and that's interesting. Even though they've borrowed these funds, they're still being conservative. What do you do? What is a loan review? Why are your services important to the industry?
Well, if you think about it, most community lenders have a mechanism or a control to do external loan review. But in the SBA world, it's limited to probably a handful of organizations that do SBA loan review. And when you think about, our eye's been taken off the ball with PPP and with the closings on the September 25th timetable. So we have to get back to best practices in SBA lending because, in my opinion, with the congressional oversight that is even more important, they're pushing the SBA to start monitoring lenders. And so we as lenders have to get ready for that. And today's the time to do that, not tomorrow when you get the call for a desktop review.
My
And
question on this is, do we best practice on using your service? I've sort of said, or SBA has encouraged lenders not to completely outsource that, but I do know if have an underwriting background, you're a department manager, there are a bunch of good companies that will come in and review select files. And I advocate the same for SBA loan servicing and liquidation.
yes,
You don't necessarily have to take over the entire portfolio, but to have you come in on a select basis,
sampling. Yep.
just as another set of eyes. You also may want to make it dollar sensitive. Do you have clients who do that, Chuck?
Well, and again, if you could also think about, we're looking at budgeting for 2021, you should probably put something in the budget for an external loan review. That's certainly important. If you're a larger shop, you probably should think about a process review. To me, there's things that you can do today to get ready for tomorrow, and there's things that you can do post-closing. So just this little bit here, looking at your internal controls, refine them, review them, create a flow chart of your work. That we have 100 clients, and many of them don't have flow charts, and that's very important when compliance is such an important facet of SBA lending.
And obviously, Chuck has a good shop. There's a number of other good shops out there that.
Yeah, there's the Preston Group. There's Garcia Marquez. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
there's a lot. There's a lot of good people out there who are providing.
It's a village. This isn't something I've never felt competitive with those folks, and it's we as an industry should be policing ourselves and helping each other and making sure that we're crossing the T's and dotting the I's. At least that's my opinion.
Katie, we talked about a 50% increase. How does that compare historically in terms of increase in core deposits?
So they've been doing the quarter estimates since 1991, and this is the largest one quarter increase we've seen since they've been using that system. And just overall, they've also seen an increase 8.2%. So that's the 8.2% is the quarter, 14.9% is year over year.
Well, I'm glad to see that. What that tells me is that the borrowers out there are smart. They're paying attention to their cash flow, and they understand the context of today's situation versus 10 years ago, where people and banks were running out of cash. Chuck, I think we've had 4 bank closures this year.
Yep.
It is Friday, so we expect something to hit this afternoon. But that's compared to the hundreds of closures that we experienced during the Great Recession. So we're nowhere near those numbers, which is fortunate for Main Street. Talk about idle fraud, Katie.
So this is probably, I just put together a list of a few of the things that were hitting my news feed this morning, but idle fraud is definitely a hot topic right now. You're seeing the OIG report that came out a couple of days ago that really kind of hit SBA a little bit hard. You saw the administration kind of saying, whoa, wait, some of this stuff maybe we've reviewed it and you're not giving us the full credit of how much we are reviewing it. But there are some questionable things in there. Going through the OIG report, there were hundreds, 958 times of counts that they had listed of borrowers who had basically said they didn't have a name. It was NA, none, self-employed. There was no information there. Funny thing hit this morning. Somebody pretended to be Trump and got a $5,000 EIDL advance using the White House.
I heard that one. That's
it's things that probably should have been caught by the SBA's programs that just unfortunately
that one's definitely a bad one. Chuck, Katie, my concern, we understand there's going to be fraud. We understand it was plugged into the numbers. Katie's following interesting story and comparing the fraud in the United States versus fraud across the pond. We have issues. They have bigger issues. But the question I have is, is this negative publicity affecting PPP 2.0 in terms of support? We understand that it's not happening, but is anybody falling off the bandwagon? Are there significant chunks of support being withheld?
That's an interesting question. I haven't actually heard anything yet about the EIDL program really affecting PPP. But that is a concern, I suppose, especially with as people get more concerned about this. Bloomberg was reporting that these frauds went viral in several states or areas where it was just almost everybody applied for one of these loans when they really shouldn't have. So I would imagine as we start hearing more of these cases, you're going to start seeing people be a little more concerned about SBA programs.
Yeah, very, very much so, very much so.
But, if you think about it, a small community bank that had no systems processed a ton of PPP loans. The SBA didn't have the capacity to do this, and they did it. And this is a result. And it's just bad publicity, which sells good news. I think the focus should be on what we've accomplished and what could be accomplished if they do a round two. This is all noise. This is noise, and it's a shame. Yeah.
I focus on the number yesterday, that 33% GDP growth, which is they doubled any previous record.
Yeah.
So that's positive. We were speculating on what percentage of that came from small business. Obviously, a good portion of that. And that is, we certainly would not have had those numbers without a PPP1. So we need to keep this stuff into perspective. We'll throw this question at you, Chuck. When the forgiveness apps are submitted, what do we do with all the supporting documentation?
I'm not involved in that, and I don't know to answer your question, Robert.
The answer to the question is the bank's required to get it as a checklist.
Yep, they are, for sure.
For 6 years, and we stumped you. That's our goal, is to stump our guests. I have no idea why it's 6 years. Katie, are you fact-checking me on what I'm saying? That sounds about right to you?
Yeah, it sounds about right. I think we're going to have to throw it to Lance maybe to give a better answer, but I think that sounds
where we are right now is that the
document retention.
Banks are not required to add them up. They're not required to verify, but they want to get the documentation and to simply file it away. Chuck, we're going to do a webinar. Any more questions, Joseph? Or is that it for pre-election, pre-Halloween sessions? By the way, I love today's date. You got to love it. 10/30/20. You got to
Absolutely.
Let's see. We're clear, Joseph. We have a webinar next week. 2 weeks. We're talking about our 12th annual hospitality financing. That's critical in terms of what's happening today. We're going to bring in some experts on construction. We know hospitality numbers are taking a hit in terms of delinquencies. We read these stories. There are some lenders who are out there doing it. So we'll talk about what a prudent lender should do in terms of how to finance hospitality projects. And that's always a fun
Great webinar. That's good.
We've been doing that for a long time. Finally, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to have our Washington, D.C. event. So we will have the secondary market. We're calling it a webinar. We're not going to do an all-day virtual event. I know you've had success with that. I'm not about to try to have someone sit at their computer all day. So we'll do something for a couple hours. But we have some questions. Let's get to those. Michelle asked, do we have to refi idle loans with SBA 7A loans? Or I guess, can we?
Again, the idle, I don't know.
Come on, Chuck. Michelle, I don't have the answer to that. Our expert resident, Lance, I think he's he's out tooling around in northern Arkansas. Lance has a Jeep, doesn't he? I've got to get out there. I have a Jeep.
He does, yes.
We'll try that. What is Windsor advantage using a 2020 compensation support for sole proprietors to file a Schedule C seeking forgiveness? Or when are you doing that? Do you know, Chuck?
Say that again, please.
when are you using their 2020 compensation support? How do you calculate forgiveness on a sole proprietorship?
That again is another area in Windsor that I haven't been involved with, so I'm going to pass on
So
those.
we're at we have a lot of good information here. So we're going to slowly and surely back away from these questions, and we'll get better answers on.
Yep, for sure.
Very good.
Not going to make them up, that's for sure.
Well, Chuck, I appreciate you coming on, and I appreciate
Yeah.
your time. I know you're
Thank you.
busy. You do a great service for the industry. Thank you for your insights. Katie, as always, have a nice weekend. And
Thanks,
thank
Bob.
you for
Thanks,
joining us
Katie.
today. We will be talking Monday.
Great. Have a great weekend.
Hopefully we'll have, I doubt we'll have any news in Washington, but we may have some PPP news in terms of processing. We'll see what's happening on that. And thank you all for supporting America's Main Street, one entrepreneur at a time. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Katie.
Have a great weekend.